All right. I think we've probably got most folks in. We may still have a few people join us as we get going, but we'll go ahead and get started with some of the formalities. First of all, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you giving some of your time to be here for this special session. People of all genders are welcome and may be in this session, as you can see already on our screen. However, we are recording in a webinar format. So while this is going to be used again for people to watch who are not able to be here with us live tonight, since your video is off and you are muted, that shouldn't be an issue. Nate is going to allow opportunities for you to raise your hand and unmute tonight though, so do keep that in mind. Again, your name won't be used unless you put that out there. We'll try not to call you out by your name. So hopefully that confidentiality will remain with you, but unless you choose to, you should not be part of the recording. Feel free to use the chat to talk with one another. If you're comfortable, go ahead and enter your name and where you're joining us from tonight. And you may want to make sure that you are messaging, I think it's all attendees and all panelists and attendees. I think the standard is all panelists. So if you do that, only those of us on the back end will see it. If you would like to submit a question or a comment to our presenter tonight, please do that through the Q&A function on your screen, and we will do our best to either answer that live or send a reply. Or as I mentioned, you may have opportunities to raise your hand and be unmuted as well. If you do need support with any technical features, you're welcome to send your question to Julia Tech Support. Same place where you selected all panelists or all panelists and attendees, you can find Julia there. She's our back-end manager handling all of the IT for us. So my name is Melissa Henshin and I am Wing's Manager of Outreach and Community Engagement, and honored to be here with you tonight. And thank you so much again for choosing to participate in our 2020 Race for Healing, where our theme for this virtual series of learning and holistic healing activities is It's About Time. We've chosen that theme this year for a few different reasons. First, we believe that as a culture, it's about time that we recognize the needs of adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, because this issue affects so many people in our culture, 1 in 5 adults. Second, to overcome the silencing and denial affecting survivors in this issue, it will take each and every one of us dedicating our most precious resource, our time, to learning about, speaking about, and supporting the healing of CSA survivors. That's why we encourage you to track your minutes through the online race platform this year, minutes for the session tonight, and any other activities that you're doing to learn about childhood sexual abuse, its impact on adult survivors, to heal, to take care of yourself. The more time we all spend supporting survivors in this issue, the more time survivors can regain to build healthy and thriving lives. Third, we know that during this difficult year of physical distancing, each and every one of us may be experiencing extra stress in our lives, and this can be hard for those directly impacted by CSA, as well as those who are not directly impacted by this issue. The good news is these types of healing and holistic healing activities that help soothe, support, and strengthen healing and resilience during trauma recovery are actually very, very beneficial for all of us when we are navigating life, and especially when we are experiencing extra stresses like those happening in the world around us. The healing journey from CSA trauma has a lot of wisdom to teach us about healing in the world. And that's why we've created these virtual sessions focused on aspects of holistic healing that follow our theme, It's About Time. Because healing is about the time that we dedicate to these foundational practices. And if you've missed any of the previous sessions this month, we invite you to go back and view those replays on the Race for Healing activity sign-up page of the Wings website. So let's get to it. Today, I would like to welcome you to our 7th virtual session in this year's series, It's About Presence. Whether you're a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, the loved one of a survivor, a healing professional, or a new friend or ally to this cause, we thank you for tuning into this presentation, and we hope you will get so much out of its wonderful content. I'm going to turn things over to our presenter for this session, Nate Ewert of Somatic, Synergies, Integrated Bodywork and Healing. Nate is a mindfulness coach, breathwork facilitator, somatic practitioner, and Reiki master, and we are thrilled to have him with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Nate.
Thank you for having me. It's my absolute pleasure to be here speaking this year. This is my third year being on the committee for the Race for Healing, and I've always been a little afraid to speak, and I'm really excited to get in front of everybody and share some of the things that I've been working on and some of the healing that I've gone through and some of the ways that I've been able to do that. Melissa mentioned a few of the things that I do. And one of the biggest things that's helped me on my healing journey has been the mindfulness coaching that I've learned over the years. And that was why we chose the phrase "it's about presence" for this, because for me, presence is the number one thing that has helped me, pulling myself into the present moment. When we're dealing with trauma, we really get stuck in fear of having a re-injury, or worrying about what's going to happen in the future, or focusing on what's happened in the past. And so being in the present moment, we find a lot of ability to heal and possibility to heal. And so my intention for this evening is to share some of these really simple practices with you guys about being present and how we're allowing our past to infiltrate that at times. But as I do with any groups that I facilitate, I always start with gratitude. Gratitude is such an important piece of living a kind and compassionate life, and opening up healing and forgiveness and all these other things. So I would love to hear from everybody. And if you can type in the chat, what are one or two things that you're grateful for right now? So go ahead and just put it in the chat there. And I may read a couple off as they come in, but for me, today has been a bit of a challenge. Earlier this week, we talked about some triggers that have happened as we've been doing some of this work this month. And today's been one of those days for me where I've had a lot of little things trigger me, and coming into this tonight had a little bit of anxiety. And what I realized as I was prepping for this tonight is that, wow, I'm gonna be here and I'm gonna be talking about presence and grounding and centering, which are all of the things that I actually need to do right now to help me come out. So I'm actually really grateful to have this opportunity to maybe be in a little bit of that vulnerable space in myself and really show how this can work. So thank you. Looks like we are getting a few things in. Your dog, Wings, these sessions, all great things. I am very grateful for my dog. She's wonderful, except for when she barks at the mailman every day. But she's still wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And Jenny says, grateful to have me. Oh, thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that. So let's get right to this. So there's a few things about being in presence that we can do to really find space in our body, safety in our body. And those three things are called grounding, centering, and orienting. And they're pretty simple things to do. And I always like to start with orienting because it really uses all five of our senses. And in using all five of our senses, like you can't smell something tomorrow, right? You can't look at something yesterday. You can only use your five senses right now in the present moment. So for this first piece with orienting, I'm going to ask for participation in all of these exercises we're going to do tonight. Please participate, and you'll get a lot more out of it by what you put into it. So the first one, we're going to be using our eyes. Really simple. So I'd like you to just allow your eyes to float around the room and see what they fall on. See if you can identify 2 or 3 or 4 objects in the room and name them. And do they have any meaning to you? Is there any significance to them? And just allow yourself a moment to think about that. I'll give you a minute. And take a deep breath while you're doing this. So I will be reminding you all to breathe quite a bit through this process tonight. Breathing is also a big piece of presence. Again, you can only breathe right now. You can't breathe tomorrow or yesterday. So I'm curious what some of you found. So as I kind of look around my room, on either side of my computer screen, I have these 2 monitors. They're speakers. And those were the things that I kept coming back to the most. And it's it's something that I'm really, really proud of. In addition to some of the other things I do, I record meditations and I'm a musician, and getting these 2 monitors this year has opened up me to be able to do some more recording and more producing of music. And so, you know, it has this really kind of warm, fuzzy feeling to me to look at those speakers and go, oh, that's what they mean to me. That's what it's done for me, right? So just by looking and paying a little more attention to what's in my room. And it's infrequent, I think, that we do that in our daily lives, of really look around and pay attention to what's around us. That's one thing that our eyes actually do when we're in more of a fight or flight state or in a trauma response. Whenever we walk into a room or into a new space, our eyes will dart around very rapidly. And it's one way that we can actually start to feel more anxious. And so if you take control of that, right, if you're in a new space and you allow yourself to do this exercise, to look around, to consciously look and identify things that are familiar to you, identify all the people in the room just by sight, right? It's one way that you can calm your nervous system. You're orienting yourself to your visible surroundings. So that is using sight to orient. And you know, Melissa mentioned using the Q&A. So at any point throughout any of this, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the question box, and I will try to get to them as they come in. And also, as you're doing any of these, if you have anything come up that you would like to share, please, by all means, share in the chat box. And again, I'll be watching the chat box for scrolling and that. So the next one is sound, one of my favorites. Again, I mentioned being a musician, so sound is very important to me. So I'd like you to all close your eyes just for a moment. Unless you need to see the interpreter, then you can keep your eyes open. But now we're going to focus on sound. So pay attention to what you hear. I want you to try to identify 3 different sounds. There's probably plenty more, but see if you can identify 3. And you're not allowed to use my voice as one of them. And take a deep breath. So my dryer in the other room is going. I can hear that. I don't know if you guys can hear that noise or not. And my chair, I don't know if you've noticed, but I have a little bit of nervous energy and my chair is rocking back and forth. And there's a little tiny squeak as I get to this side of it that I can hear, which I thought was interesting. So pay attention. What's the depth? What's beneath those sounds that you can hear? If you really quiet your mind, can you hear your breath? Can you hear your heartbeat? All right. So we just got a huge framed photograph of Montmartre. Oh, I probably totally butchered that. I apologize. My wife speaks French. I do not. But favorite spot in Paris, the fan and the attic fan and your own breathing. Perfect. So something you saw that reminded you of, I'm hoping, a pleasant experience in Paris. And yeah, some noises. Fans, I think, are great white noise and really good to pay attention to. There was a time in my life when if there wasn't some sort of a noise, it was very disarming or alarming to me. But there's always a sound, right? Whether it's the breathing or your heartbeat, your breath. Hopefully your heartbeat isn't pounding and that's why you hear it. So let's see. We'll do scent next. So again, close your eyes if you can and take a nice big deep breath through your nose. And do you smell anything? You know, we get used to the smells that are around us. Our nose is very good at just, you know, kind of hiding the odors in our house, right? It's like you don't smell your own house. You don't smell your own body at times. But if you pay attention, you can. Again, I mentioned I'm in my basement and there's laundry going, so I can actually, there's a hint of the dryer sheet in the air that I can smell. So yeah, what can you guys smell? I also cooked dinner. which was upstairs, but I had pasta. I can smell a little bit of the tomato sauce, I think, if I really pay attention. See if you can identify one or two smells. Good. And I guess maybe in the beginning I should have said, hey, get out a notebook so you can write all this down, but that's okay if you didn't. So essentially centering is that, or I'm sorry, orienting is that. We're orienting ourselves to our surroundings using our senses. So we're paying attention to what can I smell, what can I see, what can I feel. So using touch is a really good one, touching different objects around you, feeling their weight, their consistency, closing your eyes and would you be able to identify that object? It allows you to gain trust in your sense of touch. And we're not going to go into too much more of those because I'd like to move on, but I think you guys understand the idea here. We can use our five senses to really bring ourselves into the moment, right? Closing your eyes, taking a deep breath and paying attention to one sense over the other and just identifying a few things you can identify with that. And again, any questions or any other experiences with any of that, please share. But we're going to move on to centering. And centering is one of my favorites. The path that I personally walk on my healing journey and working with clients, it can be very easy to be polarized, to one side or the other of issues and things. And, especially when clients come in and they're very hyper traumatized or sensitive to many things, right? Being that centered and calm space for clients is very important. And so this is a practice I do every day, every session that I go into working with clients. And it's exactly what the name describes. It's centering. It's finding your center. Oftentimes I feel we can feel like we're off kilter, we're spinning with no direction, that I'm being pulled in all these different directions. And when you can, close your eyes, take a breath, find that place in your center, whether it's your heart or your belly, or some other place. Some people like, maybe the third eye area, forehead, and their brain. However you want to visualize that is entirely up to you. But finding that space within yourself where it is your center. And so we're going to do just a quick little meditation, a little guided meditation exercise with this. So everybody take a nice deep breath. And for those of you who can close your eyes, please do. And just in your chair, if you'd like to lay down, you can do that too. What I'd like you to do is place one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. Maybe right around your belly button, maybe just below the belly button. And just take a couple nice deep breaths. See if you can feel the air rise in your chest and in your belly. And see what feels more comfortable, if you can get both to rise at the same time, or maybe just your chest rises or just your belly rises. Play with that for just a minute, a few breaths. Where does the breath want to move more easily? And just allow it to move wherever it wants. And wherever you feel that movement settle, you can count on that being your center. And so take 3 more breaths and just allow it to move and feel that center space expand with the breath. And just allow it to move. This is about allowance and discovery, not force. And just feel that movement. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and allow the breath to just kind of normalize again. And I'll ask you, with doing the orienting and the centering, I mean, even in myself, and as I mentioned, I felt a little scattered as we started. I was pretty nervous. I've given these talks so many times, and to speak with you all tonight, I was feeling nervous, and already I'm feeling my nervous system calm down. I'm coming out of that heightened state. I'm not wanting to rock in my chair as much. All of those are signs that the nervous system is kicked up, and I can already feel them coming down in myself. And so hopefully you get to experience some of that as well. So that is centering. Again, a simple practice, but very profound when used effectively. So grounding is very similar to centering, and it's more about feeling supported than feeling more in your center. This is about feeling supported, like the ground underneath you is there to hold you, right? Like you're not going to get the rug pulled out from underneath you. So there's a few different ways to do this, and this first one, actually, I'm going to ask you to stand up and just gently jump up and down or bounce. So just kind of bounce. And if you don't want to stand up, you can do it in your chair and feel it on your bottom. But there's something about getting your feet bouncing in the ground. It's very connecting, and you feel that support and that structure of the earth, of the ground, through your entire body. And there's really no other substitute for it, to be honest, of just feeling that solidness all the way through your body reverberate by kind of jumping up and down or bouncing up and down. And just feel that support. Good. I'm envisioning all of you jumping up and down. I can't see any of you, but I know you're all doing it, so thank you. And for the people watching this at home at a later time, I hope you're jumping up and down too. It feels good. Really try it. So for the next one, I'd like you to actually just sit back down in your seat. We're going to do something very similar to the centering exercise. So close your eyes. If you can, close your eyes, please do. You're going to take some nice deep breaths into the belly, so more lower in the belly versus the chest. One of the things with breathing, when we're breathing more in the chest, high in the body, it's more of a recovery breath. And so it's really good, like if you're exercising and you're trying to catch your breath. But when we're breathing up here and trying to meditate or something, it can actually kick up more of that fight or flight system. It can stimulate the vagus nerve kind of in the wrong way. And so whenever we're trying to do a calming activity or calming exercise, it's better to breathe more lower into the belly. Again, we're going to stimulate the vagus nerve to get you more into the rest and digest mode. So if you can, breathe into the belly. And if you're having trouble with that, place your hands on your belly and just see if you can allow your breath as you inhale to move your hands. And as you exhale, the hands are kind of pulling back in, and just play with that. Your body falls into this very naturally when you're laying down to fall asleep, but sometimes to engage it consciously the first few times can be challenging, but practice it. I know it's possible for everybody to do. So again, we're sitting, your feet are flat on the ground. Take some nice big belly breaths. Allow your breath to extend. So allow the exhale to extend out even longer than the inhale. Good. I want you to really pay attention to your feet on the floor. Pay attention to your bottom in your seat, in your chair. And just really feel the solidness of the floor. Move your feet around a little bit, wiggle them to really press them into the floor so they feel really supported. Now I want you to imagine there's roots coming out of the bottom of your feet. They're going into the earth, all the way into the center of the earth. And this is a visualization. It's an awareness you're opening up. And just allow yourself to feel rooted, to feel connected. and supported. Again, continuing the belly breath. Give yourself 3 more breaths here. Again, feeling that support. With every exhale, you're extending it longer, allowing yourself to sink even more into that support, into your feet, into your seat. Good. When you're ready, open your eyes and just allow your breath to come back to normal. Again, another one of my favorite activities. So all of these I'm sharing with you, I do all of these fairly regularly. Grounding quite often. Again, every morning when I get to my office before I start my day, I do some sort of a grounding exercise. Feet flat on the floor, sometimes laying on the floor, but I'm really feeling the support of the floor on my feet, on my back, on my shoulders if I'm laying down. It's very important. And keeping in mind the idea of that support. I'm going to say support like 35 more times talking about grounding, because that's what it's about. It's about feeling that we are supported, and that groundedness of the earth, that like we're here, we're human, we're of the earth. And the more we connect to that, the more present we feel. Because again, I can't ground tomorrow. I can't do it yesterday. I can only take time to ground myself and feel that connection and that support right now. Present. Awesome. Everybody take a big deep breath for me. So those are some of the basic presence activities that I do and I coach and I put people through. And again, please, if there's any questions, ask them. I'd also love to see any comments about how you guys feel, those of you who have chosen to do these exercises with us. If you felt a difference in the nervous system calm, did you feel your breath shift at all? Did maybe some of the mind chatter calm down? Relaxed, awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, relaxed is a good one. You know, you can't be relaxed and anxious at the same time. So, you know, these exercises, when we pull ourselves into presence, even if we were feeling anxious in the present moment, that level of presence diminishes the anxiety, and we get that sense of calm come in very quickly. Calm, yep, two calms. Yawning a lot, awesome. I'm so glad you mentioned yawning. There's this other exercise I wanted to do with everybody, and usually it can bring up a yawn or a sigh. And yawning is one of the things that releases energy, and it's a sign that our system is shifting from the fight or flight response, that sympathetic nervous system, into the rest and digest or parasympathetic nervous system. So we're getting out of fight or flight and into calm and relaxed. Feed and breed is another way that they call that system. So yeah, a lot of calm, yawning, me too's, perfect. So this one's a little more fun, I think, for me, because you can feel it really quickly. And it's a cool one that really stimulates what's called the vagus nerve, which, when we're talking about being present and trying to bring the nervous system down, it does it. It just tricks the nervous system into doing it. So this one's really easy, and I'll do it with you guys to demonstrate it. So you can do this sitting up or laying down. Sometimes it can take about 15 seconds. Sometimes it can take a minute or two. And there's no right or wrong here. So what you're going to do is interlace your fingers and put them behind your head and sit up nice and tall or straight or lay down. And you're going to pull your elbows back as far as you can. Now, you're going to do some nice easy breaths through your nose. And while you're doing that, without turning your head, look as far to the right or left as you can. And we're going to hold this here until, like, the breath shifts. A sigh might come up or a yawn might come up, but you will feel something in your breath that shifts. It can, like I said, it can take up to 2 minutes sometimes. And there's the yawn for me. And so, shake yourself out. And then we're going to do it again on the other side. So again, hands behind the head, elbows back. And now look as far to the opposite side as you can. That actually happened really quick for me. There's a sigh already. And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a sigh, a yawn. The breath will shift. The body will take a big, deep breath on its own. And that, again, that's a sign that you're shifting out of that higher response into a lower response. And what does that do? So when we get into that more fight or flight system, we're out of presence because we're either focusing on injury from the past or trauma from the past, or we are anxious about something that hasn't occurred yet in the future. And so we're stuck in this mind storm. It's actually like a neurological storm that happens. And so this is one of those ways that we can shift ourselves out of that response. And that allows us to be present, because when we're focused on the past or we're focused on the future in fear, we can't be present right now. Cool. Mine did a little. My eyes watered a lot. Yes, that absolutely happens. Mine were starting to water, but you'll definitely have some response. And I will say too, sometimes, especially if you're new to this type of a somatic experience with trauma healing, sometimes it can take a while. I've had some clients that they'll sit there for like 5 minutes and they're like, nothing's happening. And it's like, just be patient, keep the breath steady, and it will come, I promise. So the yawn came quicker on the right than the left. Yep, sometimes that'll happen. Usually the second side does come quicker than the first, because now the body kind of knows. Oh, we have a question in the Q&A. Let's take a look at that real quick. So, thank you. I do feel more present and calm. Are you typically coaching your clients to breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth? If so, why is that? Very good question. I get that question a lot. And it is best to breathe through the nose. There's a lot of science around how breathing through the nose is just much more healthy for you in a lot of ways. That being said, there are times where in through the nose and out through the mouth is absolutely appropriate. There are some big techniques that I'll teach people in sessions where you can get a lot more air out. There's some studies now that they're showing in like acute panic attacks and asthma attacks, if you can get people to blow all the way out and actually hold at the end of an exhale after they've blown all the way out through their mouth, it can trick the system out of that. We're so used to hearing people say, take a deep breath in, right? And they're finding now that it's more about slowing the breath down than it is taking in a big breath. The body has enough oxygen. We want to trick the system into, well, I don't want to say trick, but we want to encourage the system to slow back down and to operate in a more efficient way. And so if I'm in this panic attack, hyperventilating, and I try to take in a big breath, it's like my lungs are already full. So I actually need to get some of that air out. And get some of that carbon dioxide out so that the exchanges can happen more efficiently and better. So I'm going into a lot more detail on that. I don't know if I'm answering your question about whether it's best to breathe with the mouth or the nose. Like overall, most meditation I do, I breathe through the nose. However, in breath work, which is a way to create like an altered state for healing, we breathe through the mouth. So if you're doing it consciously and it's from choice, it can be a very powerful experience to do breathing through the mouth, because it's a bigger opening. It allows for more oxygen and carbon dioxide to pass. But for most meditations and these exercises, I think breathing through the nose is best. So there you go. Very long-winded answer. Thank you for asking. And oh, good. They deleted it for me. Cool. Still figuring out all the tech side on my end. So let's see. It never happened for you. So it is okay. Keep trying. As I said, sometimes it can take 5 minutes, sometimes it can take 10 minutes. Again, if you haven't allowed your body to go to this space to be able to shift down, it can take a while, and there's some trust that's needed. So maybe practicing some of these other exercises first and getting really comfortable with grounding, with centering, with your space, feeling safe in your space. So that's ultimately what all of these are about. Orienting absolutely is about recognizing your surroundings and feeling comfortable and safe in the place you are right now. Centering is being able to find your center in that space, and grounding is about letting your body know it's supported in that space. And so safety is a big thing. If you're not feeling safe, you could sit like this for 3 hours and nothing will ever happen. So creating some of that safety and the presence in these exercises we talked about first is very, very important. So there you go. Jenny says, I didn't know those distinctions in breathing. Ooh, there's a lot. There's a lot of information out there about breathing, and there's more and more coming because breathwork is becoming a very, very popular alternative in healing. A lot of people that have worked with different medications, even plant medicines and things, they're turning to the breath because they don't have to take anything. And there's all these really amazing ancient practices to get yourself so present just by using the breath. And all of these exercises we've done so far tonight have been about using the breath to encourage that state of presence. So thank you. Someone said, I need to hear that again. I want to write it down. Well, the good thing is we're recording. I'm not sure I could repeat everything I just said. But definitely watch the recording. And yes, there are some good meditations that I put up on the thing, and I'm always recording more too. So great. I would like to, so what we've talked about so far is kind of set us up for this foundation of presence, but really, how does that look in mindfulness? So, I mentioned in the beginning that mindfulness has been this really amazing tool, but it's like, okay, so now I'm present, I'm aware. What does that really mean? Like, what does that allow me to do? How can I function differently in my life if I'm using these practices, these modalities? It's like, okay, I can meditate all day long and feel very present, but now what, right? So this is where mindfulness comes in. So the first step in mindfulness is all about presence. It's getting present, being aware of your surroundings right now, being aware of what's in your mind right now. And there's sort of 3 main dimensions of mindfulness, we could call it, or relationships. And you don't, in the studies that I've done in mindfulness and all the work that I've done in it, I've really only ever heard this from one person who's my teacher, and I use this all the time because I think it's so profound. And it's the idea of relationships, right? So there's 3 main relationships when it comes to mindfulness. There's the relationship to self, the relationship to others, and the relationship to our past. And so how do we relate with those things? So that internal dimension of relating to self, there's some key factors that are part of that. So how much value do you place on yourself, right? That's part of how you relate. I know in my journey with everything, I did not place very much value on myself. And that's been a journey in itself, finding my value, finding that I matter. And that's a big piece of my work, creating a safe space and allowing people to know that they matter and that they can heal. And for me, that's what value is about. The confidence that you have, that you see within yourself, how you interact and feel about your skills and your intelligence. Do you feel like you're skillful? Do you feel like you're intelligent? The interesting thing about all of these things together is they inform and they kind of these are your self-beliefs, and they inform all the decisions you make. So everything that you think about yourself, how you relate to yourself, is how you decide to do anything in your life. So that's the internal dimension, how we relate to ourselves. How we relate to others is the second part, the relational dimension. So who are the different yous that show up with different people? So that's always an interesting one. So even though it's like, oh, it's how I relate to others, well, do you show up in different ways with different people? Right? I guarantee you do. We all do, right? I put on a very different face for my dad than I do with my clients, or, I show up differently with my daughter than I do with my wife, or, so these are very normal things. But what mindfulness asks us to do is, from that present state, take a look at that, pay attention to it, ask some questions around that. Oh, how do I relate? How do I show up differently in these things? You know, how do you conduct yourself with other people? I know there's some people I'm very professional and very, you know, my hair's combed and all of those things. And there's some people I just don't care. And, you know, I drop a lot of F-bombs and other bad language, and and it's okay, right? So we conduct ourselves in different ways with different people. We allow ourselves to get more angry with others, with some people, than we do with others. We allow ourselves more joy with some people than with others. How guarded do we find ourselves with some people, right? Mindfulness asks us to look at all of these things from that present state. So, you know, if I know I'm having a difficult time understanding somebody, or if I'm having a conflict with somebody, I could do an orienting exercise or a grounding exercise, get myself very present, feel very calm in my nervous system, and start asking myself some really honest questions of, wow, how did I come about acting this way with this person? I wonder what drives me to conduct myself in this way with this group of people, right? And it starts to give us some awareness around. So awareness comes after presence. So presence and then awareness. So we get presence, we start to ask some questions, and we start to gain awareness around how we function. And then we have the developmental dimension, which is how we relate to our past. And this is where I see so many trauma survivors struggle, right? Our past becomes this really thick filter that we operate through. And a lot of times, I know in my own journey, like, I didn't even realize all these things were in my way, that all of this stuff from my past was putting shades on all of the experiences I was having that made things seem a lot less safe, that made things seem more dangerous, that made things seem like I needed to judge them or that they were wrong. And a lot of that had to do with, because I hadn't squared myself with my past yet. So this dimension is where a lot of psychology spends their time. So, you know, typically when you go to your therapist, you're going to bring up the past and you're going to try to disseminate it, try to figure it out, try to gain insight and clarity and reconciliation with these things from the past. Mindfulness would ask, you know, how much does the past affect your present? In mindfulness, we don't consider dwelling on the past, because the past is always going to show up in front of you. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, we don't ever have to go backwards to heal, right? If there's a challenge in front of me that's stirring up emotions, that's stirring up old traumas, old traumas is the best word. My mind is not wanting to work. I'm not very mindful today. I'm pretty mind empty, I think. But it stirs up things, right? So there's something here in our present. It's right in front of me. And it's stirring up all this stuff from the past. Like, I don't have to go backwards because it's right here. It's right here in front of me. And I get to look at it from the present moment. I don't have to go backwards to look at it. So we'll always be presented with opportunities to look at our past in our present moment. I mentioned the triggers that we talked about in some of the calls earlier this week with the Race for Healing. I think there were 3 of us that spoke about, hey, here's how this month is going. I personally was getting triggered. I've been deep in the work. And what happens is when we're doing this work, when we're being present, all those feelings will come up. The body holds on to that stuff. The mind holds on to that stuff. And so when we get present, the body goes, oh, all right, you're present. Here's this sadness you haven't felt, or here's this fear that you haven't felt. And now that you're present, you can feel it. And it's really important to have those first 3 things of grounding, centering, and orienting, so that we can handle those when they come up. So when I'm presented with this emotion or this trigger, right, our immediate response usually is to go, this thing in front of me it's scaring me, it's dangerous, it's hurting me, it's all of these things, right? And mindfulness asks you to ask the question, is that actually true? Or is that your past that's coming through and maybe you're not seeing everything the way it should be. I'll share a story about this from my past. So just very briefly, I grew up in a domestically violent home. I was physically abused a lot by my stepfather, and I also was molested as a child by some older boys in the neighborhood. It was a few different people in different locations, and I grew up knowing how to be a victim. I grew up knowing how to be abused, and I grew up seeing all sorts of situations that were unsafe. And when my wife and I first moved in together, we got into this argument that I pace, right? I have to disperse this energy. So I was feeling anxious and upset, and I was walking around the house, and we were yelling and arguing and that. And I walked into the bedroom, and she followed me into the bedroom and shut the door. And as soon as she shut the door, I lost it. I was like, let me out of here. I went into the red. I was trying to get out of the room, and she didn't want to let me. And it was challenging. And there wasn't anything unsafe that was happening. She was coming from, she wanted resolve. She wanted to talk. When she was a child, she grew up, when there was conflict, her parents would take her into their room, they'd close the door, and they would talk about it, they would hug it out, and everything would be fine. And that's what she was trying to create. She wasn't trying to harm, she wasn't trying to do any of that. And in my mind, because my past was so projected onto my present, that I thought I was going to die. Because in my household growing up, behind closed doors, when there was a fight going on, was not a safe space. And it took us a while to figure that out, to figure out why my response was so heated when she would shut the door. And again, it's very clear now, and even now I'm like, I can't believe that was such a mystery at the time, but it was. And that's an example of how our past can really inform our present situation and cloud what we're seeing. So I want to do just a really quick exercise. And if you have a pen or paper, jot down some of this, jot down these questions, because this is a really good one for you to do and take some time with. And thank you, Jenny. She says that's a powerful example. Yes, thank you. It's one of my favorite ones to share because it illustrates that so clearly of how, our trauma veil, this veil of abuse that we carry at times can really cloud what we're seeing and keep us in that victim role. So that's been a big thing for me. So how did I improve my value was a question in the Q&A. Oh boy, we could talk a whole hour on that. Thank you for that question. And it's a lot of knowing and a lot of trusting. Becoming present and becoming aware. So asking a lot of these questions that we're talking about how we relate to things and how our own filters, I like to call them filters, right? I don't like to call them traumas because that makes them wrong. I needed to learn some of these lessons. And so these filters, the more that I've removed these filters, the more that I've realized I have value, right? The more I've realized how some of these past things are affecting the way I make decisions, and I give myself a different choice in those moments from presence, it shows me that I am worth it, that I do matter. And so for me, it was that you matter comes with that. Oh, lost sound. Are we back? Yes? Okay, good, we're back. So maybe you guys weren't supposed to hear the answer to that question. About 20 seconds, okay. Well, I was probably just rambling anyways. I have a tendency of doing that. That's part of my value, is rambling. So there you go. So hopefully I answered that question. Hopefully you got the answer from that. So I'm going to ask you guys these 5 questions, and this is a process I'd love for you to take yourselves through. And this is, it's called How Present is Your Past? And it's going to take you through part of the process where I discovered that piece about myself and my wife and how I was using those filters to really cloud the way that I was seeing my reality. Okay. So, take a moment to answer each of these questions when you do this, but do some of the grounding exercises, do the orienting before you do this so that you feel safe and you feel supported. So the question number one, and you know what? Could somebody type these in the chat box for everybody as I read these? So, or maybe I can. How about I do it? So what is the earliest memory that you can remember from your childhood? And try to recall a specific event or experience, not just a feeling or impression. And there we go. So what is the earliest memory that you can remember from your childhood? Try to recall a specific event or experience, not just a feeling or impression. Question two, you know what, I'm just going to type all of these in right now. Question two is, what are the impressions you have of yourself in this memory? What are the impressions that you have of yourself in this memory? The next question is, what are the impressions that you have of each of the people who you are associated with in your memory? So with this, we're doing the internal dimension, the relation to self. We're doing the relation to others, but also the past experience as well. Excuse me. So how might the experience you had back then have impacted the way in which you relate to yourself today? And then finally, how might the experience you had back then have impacted the way in which you relate to other people today? And so, especially looking at those last two questions, the story that I shared about this argument I had with my wife, where it was this huge aha moment, realizing that the experience I had back then of, being in this fight with my dad and him coming in the room and closing the door and, all hell breaks loose, right? Like that was driving my reaction to what was happening with my wife. I mean, this is, 30 years later, right? And so the experience I had back then, the way it impacted the way in which I relate to my wife, like in that moment, I saw her as this evil, abusive person that was not true at all, like at all. She's not that person at all. And I allowed that past experience to drive this present experience because it was still so present for me. And so that, again, to wrap all of this up, like that is the idea of mindfulness. It's understanding how we relate to self, to others, and to our past to open us up to be able to choose something different, to choose something better, to choose healing when we can, to choose a different way of interacting that's healthier, that leads to more value for self, that leads to better and deeper relationships. The more we understand our own inner workings, the easier life gets, and the easier our relationships with others get, and the easier situations get when they come up and they maybe trigger something from the past, because now I can know, oh wait, this is an old feeling I'm having here. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what's happening in front of me. So I don't have to point it at that, but it's there, so now I can process it. I don't have to go backwards because it's right here, right now to feel. So, and it looks like Melissa has uploaded a worksheet I provided, and I'm not sure which, oh, that's the life clarity check-in. So that's a really great check-in just to kind of see where you're at. Do you want to pull that up, Melissa, real quick? We've got just a couple minutes left, and I can just kind of run through that real fast. So this is a worksheet that I go through about once a month or so. I used to do it weekly, but it's really just getting a good check on where you are, and then also setting an intention of where you want to be. So there's reflecting and there's intending, and it's 2 pages. So the reflecting is the first page, and it's looking at, people who add value to your life, people who detract from your life. You guys can read, but they're, it's looking at a lot of different areas and just putting down on paper, hey, here's where I am right now. And I love the attitudes. You know, what are the attitudes that enhance your life? What are the attitudes that detract from your life? We all have a lot. You know, the activities that you do, and then the intending piece. It's really easy, I think, especially in the healing process, to just kind of go with the flow and be sort of on the whim of wherever the body's taking you or wherever the emotions are taking you. But sometimes setting some intentions are really important. And I use this one a lot. Almost every men's group I do, every group healing, I ask for intention. And I love that. What are 3 words that describe you as your best self? I think, I can't see the top question there, Melissa. Yep, 3 words that describe my best self are. So I'd love to see in the chat from everybody, kind of as we're closing this down, like, what are 3 words that describe your best self? I always like kind, compassionate, and loving. Oh man, I use those 3 words a lot. And what's interesting, just like any sort of prayer or intention that we set, when we put these things in motion, we always have opportunities to practice them, right? Just because I put kindness as me at my best doesn't mean I'm always going to be kind, but I'm going to have a lot of opportunities to practice it. So this is I was really pleased to finally put this form together. I built it from a few different teachers and guides and worksheets that I had that I've collected over the years, and I really like the way this one came together. So I encourage you guys to use this in addition to the other activity that I put in the chat box. They're really great ways to be present, to feel connected to self, and to start gaining some understanding from that presence on how we can really open our healing journey up even more, and be more present with the feelings, be more present with the people that are around us. Resilient, compassionate, patient. Resilient, I love that. And be careful, because if you're asking for resilience, they're going to throw a lot of things at you to show you how resilient you are. But also a really good word. And I do think, you know, every one of us that are on this call, just, you know, knowing the Wings community, we are all so resilient. And I just commend all of you that have shown up for this race for healing, and that are doing the work. You know, congratulations. No matter where you're at, if it's glorious and you're feeling amazing, like, that's so great. And if you're down in the muck in the dark night of the soul, like, that's so great too, because you're healing there. All right. In those spaces, they're sacred. It's healing. Like, that's where the real work takes place. And I know it can be challenging, and using these grounding exercises, centering, orienting, it helps you be present with those feelings that are coming up when you're in those darker, harder places, where you're learning about resiliency, where you're learning how strong you really are. All of these things help, and they've helped me tremendously. So smile. That's a good. Are you telling me to smile, or is that one of your attitudes? So thank you guys so much. We are right at time. This has been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, Melissa, come on back and close us out. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Nate. That really was a pleasure. And I don't know about the rest of you on the call, but I really feel like you make this kind of sometimes hard to grab idea of, like, mindfulness something really feasible and within reach. And your approach is just makes it so enjoyable to engage in this type of activity. So thank you again so much for sharing that with all of us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And thank each and every one of you for being on the call today, for watching this at a later time, for giving us your time and your presence here today. Our intention in sharing this information with you has been to provide ways that you can continue to stand with CSA survivors by engaging in activities to learn about CSA, understand more about the healing process, and engage in activities that promote the mind-body-spirit connection. This certainly was that. And we are creating a world where survivors of childhood sexual abuse can be seen, heard, honored, and supported. And we honor you and thank you for joining us in this discussion and this practice, and hope that you join us for our final activity next Wednesday at 4 p.m. It's about standing with CSA survivors. This final session will not be recorded. Rather, it will be a time to share with one another and enjoy some connection, community, and celebration. Specifically, we'll look back on the month's activities, check in on how we did with our individual goals and intentions, and most importantly, celebrate the hard work that we have all done together during this special month to build our individual and collective resilience. We'd also like to hear your ideas and suggestions for carrying these efforts forward into and through the next year. We are so excited to spend some time together with you next week. In the meantime, you've heard me say it before, we've got these great resources that Nate just shared with us tonight, more resources on the Race for Healing page of the website. Engage in these learning and healing activities, track your minutes, help us meet our goals. Email us at wings@wingsfound.org if you have any questions or comments or need assistance. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.